Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a perspicacious Charles Coulombe.
Perspicacious?
Yeah.
You mean I'm a perspicat?
Is that an actual word?
It is now. I know stuff, is what you're saying.
Yes. A lot of stuff.
I draw conclusions from that stuff.
Yes.
Sometimes those conclusions are correct. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Especially like in the field of labor relations?
Well, sometimes. Rarely.
So you don't really consider my judgments in labor relations to be correct?
Well, it's called a conflict of interest, right? I mean,
conflict of interest? What are you talking about?
I don't know. People push as hard as they can all the time. So it's easy to overdo. You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't. What are you saying?
It's easy to go too far, right? I mean, so you're pro-union? Are you pro-union? Are you one of these people who vote Democrat because you're pro-union?
I'm both pro-union and pro-management. I'm a corporatist. I'm a guild socialist. I'm a distributist. I'm a solidarist. I believe in bringing together labor, capital, retail, wholesale. I believe in everyone having their fair share of the pie.
That sounds nice.
Yes, it is. It's very nice.
But how do you actually execute that? It's great pie in the sky ideals there, Charles, but how do you actually do that?
What you do is you put the common good first.
You know, I've been saying that for so long. The common good, we always need to be looking at, but I think the problem is you and I have somewhat different ideas of the common good.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
I don't think we're as far apart as you think we are. I can prove it.
A perfect example is the cost-sharing program for Tumblr House, which quite clearly supports the common good because we're all in this together, but then suddenly you're not interested in the common good.
Well, let me put this another way. What would happen if there were no cogs in the machine that is Tumblr House? If there were no workers? If basically you came in one day, whether you drove in and there was no one at the gate, or you landed by helicopter and there was no one to meet you, and the whole Tumblr tower was empty of personnel. Now, you wouldn't get anything done. There'd be nothing for you. It'd be zip. And even if your top executives were there, nothing would happen. But contrary-wise, what would happen if everybody showed up, but you and the executives weren't there?
Then the same thing, nothing would happen, yeah.
This is my point. So you see, the two sides need each other. Now, I'm here as what's called an honest broker. I'm a mediating influence. I'm someone who's here to bring together the two sides who absolutely need each other.
You seem to have a problem. Yeah, there's a serious deficiency in your analysis because you make no differentiation between skilled and unskilled labor.
Oh, no, I make a difference about it. I mean, I remember when you were in the mailroom, and believe me, nobody got more unskilled than you were there. I mean, it'd be hard to find anyone less skilled than you were when you were working in the mailroom at Tumblr House. But you see, you had other skills. What you lacked as a mailroom flunky, you had other skills that were put to the work for the greater good and the common good elsewhere. See? I remember, I can say this now because he's long since retired, but I remember when Mr. Flanagan was running the mailroom down there. He'd been there for, 35 years or something. And, he told me, he said, it's a good thing that young Vinny is the boss's younger brother. My God, we'd have fired him.
Well,
but what he didn't see was that your talents lay elsewhere.
It's not a one-to-one. It's not a. The skills are very different, right? It's like, oh wow,
Yes,
boy, Charles would have been a horrible gardener, right?
I would have been. I
Yeah.
admit it.
So I don't
The
understand. So I don't
smartest thing
understand.
your brother ever did was keep me away from the garden.
So I don't understand the point you're making.
Well, the point I'm making is horses for courses. The fact of the matter is that in the big mosaic that is Tumbler House, everyone plays their part and everyone deserves a right reward for what they do. And if one part of the puzzle were yanked out, the whole edifice would collapse. It's basically a love network.
Right. Well, I think that's the crux of the matter, right? The right reward. What is the right reward?
I'm glad you asked that question. The right reward is a living wage.
Well, see, we're in California, and as I've said before, the entire state of California, the pricing is based off two people working, right? The man and wife. So we adjust our prices accordingly.
Well, see, what I'm thinking is this. If the married men in the working in the Tumbler House Tower made sufficient so that their wives didn't have to work, this would go very, very far toward reestablishing the reign of social justice in our part of California.
Yeah, except Tumbler House would go broke. That's like, oh, well, if only these people could loot stores, then they would be able to get the things they need. Well, you destroyed the store, so now we're going bankrupt. But you got what you wanted for a while. So you're basically on the side. You're basically on the side of the looters. You're coming out, and you're basically anti-law and order. You're basically and
I thought you said you didn't watch the debate.
I didn't watch the debate.
Well, you've got the same skills they had.
Oh, that's a low. Wow.
Well, I'm just saying. Will you disavow white supremacy?
Yes.
Will you disavow Antifa?
Yes.
Do you think the Eagle won the debate?
Yeah, you made a post about that. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I would like to share. For those of you who didn't see the debate, there was this wonderful eagle on top. There was a Civil War era thing, and it said "the Union and the Constitution forever," with the words around this spread eagle crouching on a shield of the American flag. Very inspiring, very 1865. And I thought that of the four participants in the debate, the eagle, the moderator, who wrong title for the person, and the two presidential candidates, I thought the eagle did the best job, gave the best performance, and as far as I'm concerned, won the debate. Didn't say anything stupid, didn't interrupt anybody, didn't get interrupted. I thought that the moderator was amazing because he managed to be both domineering and ineffectual, which is quite a combination. You don't see that every day.
Chris Wallace is normally a tough interviewer. That's his reputation. I didn't see it. I mean, I saw bits of it where he's talking about Trump interrupting, and I have a theory about Fox. I've always had this theory, which I don't believe they are motivated by ideology at all. I don't think they ever were. I think somebody looked at the entire landscape of media and said, wow, everyone is completely liberal. There's a giant gold mine if anyone espoused conservative opinions at all. And so they went there. But then I think they feel that they're getting pigeonholed. And so to me, my theory is this was an opportunity to court liberals. Like, see, we can be quote unquote fair and balanced. We can get tough on Trump. What do you think about that theory?
Well, I've always distrusted Fox simply because it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. And Rupert Murdoch, my countryman, that is to say, my fellow American, who renounced his Australian citizenship in order to keep his monopoly, and who, of course, denounced his queen. He is the patron of the Republicans in Australia. He was the odious, oh God, what's that odious little man, Blair. He was Tony Blair's paymaster in England, and despite his own scandalous private life, bugged the Prince of Wales's private lines and did everything he could to wreck Prince Charles. And over in America, he's the patron of Fox News and one of the major financiers of Cardinal Mahoney's Cathedral. So I don't know. I just I don't care for Rupert Murdoch and all his works and pomps.
That seems to isn't that paralleling a biblical verse? Satan and all his works and pomps.
Isn't that odd? And to answer your question, I think that Murdoch's minions, they are whatever they need to be to make a buck, or a pound, as the case may be.
So you do agree with me that
I do agree with you.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's just that I would say that it isn't just Fox. I would say that they reflect their owner.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? There's kind of a busy week. Trump got COVID.
Trump got COVID.
Which I think is good for everybody, for conservatives.
It.
Yeah, because that gives him power.
Listen. I've had the best COVID. All right, there was never any COVID as good as mine. This is a strain. Nobody ever had this COVID before. Nobody ever had COVID like this. It's a strain we've got. It's different. Nobody else ever had this. It's the best COVID anybody ever had. He always gets that hand thing in there.
Yeah.
But no, he'll have something to use. And of course, some of the reaction was predictable. There were actually people saying that they hope he died of it, which is really nice. One lady said, even though this goes against my moral identity, I kind of wish he'd die. And when she said her moral identity, I thought to myself, honey child, you talk about facts not in evidence. Your moral identity is definitely one of them. I mean, gosh, I don't wish Biden dead, and I certainly don't care for the man. And Lord knows he'll be there soon enough, but I'm not in any hurry to have him get there. No, I mean, I'm looking at all this stuff, and again, the bigger picture that nobody seems to want to address is why are we here? How do we get to the place that these two are the best we've got to offer?
Right. That's part of it. And the thing that I'm seeing more and more in people is these lower expectations, right? Where liberals can't expect anything to be done because of Republicans. Conservatives can't expect anything because liberals are blocking everything. Nobody actually expects their side to do anything, and there's sort of this fatalism where it's like, and resignation.
No. And while cities go up in flames.
And there's no looking at other solutions, honestly.
No.
They're just resigned, and that's so sad.
Well, listen, the best thing, in my humble opinion, the best thing that could happen to the United States of America is if the Democrats got off this weird race instead of class Marxism they've embraced, and it become a serious political party again, rather than attacking the very framework of the country they're trying to get control of. How's about trying to beat the Republicans in terms of sanity, coming out for law and order, coming out for a real economy, abandoning socialism. That's what I would do if I were them. If they did that, then and they could come up with somebody who didn't appear crazy, they would have no trouble, I think, defeating the Orange Man. But they're not going to do that.
I don't know. Part of me, I mean, how could they not do that? Because it seems like there should be some sort of social osmosis or something where somebody step in to that vacuum and provide some reason and logic on that side and really kind of take over.
You would think so, but the problem is that the leadership of that party, the machinery of the party, and to a degree of the Republican Party as well, really is not very responsive to the people, to the rank and file.
You know, as I say this, it occurred to me that what I would wish for and you'd wish for would happen if people could think for themselves and if they weren't sheep. But because they're sheep, the powers that be can just sort of shepherd them into this madness.
Yeah, which, you know, it wouldn't be so bad, and this is a paradox, it wouldn't be so bad if they didn't have the illusion of control. The populace, I mean.
Yeah.
If they weren't so convinced that our current system really gives them representation, they wouldn't be so easy to roll over. You would have, for instance, I mean, again, a lot of the measures for the COVID crisis, which again, you know, Mr. Biden was going on about the president not doing enough for COVID. Well, what he should have smacked back with and did not is that under the Constitution, that's not his role. That's not his place. It's the place of the governors or the mayors. It's always been that way. You think that President Wilson, when he was busy with the Congress of Versailles, swooped down to oversee the response to the pandemic? Gosh, no. He was in France screwing up Central Europe at the peace treaty. Now, mind you, I wish he hadn't done that, but nevertheless, that was his job, not micromanaging the states and the communities in their response to the pandemic of 1918.
That's all we ask for is mismanagement of your respective area. You don't go into other people.
Let other people mismanage their sectors. You ruin yours. You see, you gotta understand, everyone has their own proper sphere to wreck.
Right.
You shouldn't poach on other people's areas of responsibility to destroy, either through active miscreants or through, laziness, ignorance, whatever it might be, whether it be the wrong action or the wrong inaction. Either way, stick to your own area to screw up.
You know, one of the probably the only political thing I enjoyed this past month was when Newsom met with Trump. And I loved it because...
When Harry met Sally.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you. You take that much money, you got to say thank you. And you got
to say, yeah, boss, it's a pleasure to meet you, you know. Let me keep that hand out.
That's what Newsom did. As much as different as those two are, he had to thank and really suck up to Trump.
Yeah, let me tell you someone. You're trying to sit on Sugar Daddy's lap. You best be nice to Sugar Daddy.
So,
I mean, but see, that was the thing. That was Trump's response to the thing. I mean, other than, his attempting to limit the people coming in from China. Of course, at that time, Biden called him a xenophobe and all this sort of thing. Then also there was the question when he went after Biden's son for his foreign entanglements. And, Biden said, oh, that's got nothing to do with me, blah, 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 and you should be ashamed, and so on. So, well, no, actually, it has a lot to do with the son of a presidential candidate being closely tied to foreign interests. Precisely because it could very easily affect his conduct in office. But Trump did not make that connection. He just came across as though he was, trying to score a cheap shot.
Well, if Biden's religion won't affect his conduct in office, why would his son?
Well,
he's impervious. Nothing impacts him.
Well, there it is. You got me on that one. And they could have said that. If I won't let my religion affect me, why do you think I'd let my son affect me? Yeah, okay. Again, and this is where you can really say to me, okay, boomer, feel free. But, the first election that I really remember very well was an hysterical election. And that was 1964. And the Democrats, they did stir up all kinds of hysteria against Barry Goldwater. I remember that very, very well, even though I was very little at the time. I was, 4 years old. But I certainly remember my parents talking about it. And my dad's joke, which was not unique to him, was, I think I've said this before, but he said, they told me if I voted for Goldwater, I'd get a war in Southeast Asia. Sure enough, I voted for Goldwater, and I got a war in Southeast Asia. So, as a result of that, 4 years later, in the election of 68, and, it's kind of strange because in my memory, remember, I was little. I started out as 4 and I ended up as 8. A year was a long time. So that 4-year, and in the middle of it, we moved out to LA. So that 4-year span for me was like a lifetime in my memory. But everything changed between 64 and 68. We went, in a sense, from the 50s to the 70s. And I remember how different the election of 68 was than the election of 64, because then the hysteria was on the other foot. We'd had the long, hot summer of 67, and then you had the Democratic Convention in 68, which was just a mess. Total madhouse. You must have heard of it.
Yeah.
But there were riots and arrests, and it was just utter chaos. And that reflected where the country was at the time. So 4 years earlier, Goldwater is a crazy who's gonna drop the bomb. And that turned into Hubert Humphrey as an ineffectual moron who won't be able to keep the country from falling apart at the seams. And the result was that we got Mr. Nixon for good and for ill. I remember that. And of course, those elections were hard fought. The 64 election was closer to what we're going through now than the 68, only in the sense of democratic vituperation. But it's close to 68 in the sense that it's being done against a background of civic unrest and insanity. Incidentally, did you see that thing I posted from the AP and their style book?
No.
About how you're, oh Manischewitz. Well, let me see if I can find it. This, when you think you're used to stupidity and you realize you're not, let me see if I can find it easily. If I can't, then I'm afraid we're stuck without it. But the Associated Press, to a style book, which many, many newspapers and other news outlets use as Bible for writing stories. Yeah, here we are. This is the new guidance from the AP Style Book online. Quote, use care in deciding which term best applies. A riot is a wild or violent disturbance of the peace involving a group of people. The term riot suggests uncontrolled chaos and pandemonium. Focusing on rioting and property destruction rather than underlying grievance has been used in the past to stigmatize broad swaths of people protesting against lynching, police brutality, or for racial justice, going back to the urban uprisings of the 1960s. Unrest is a vaguer, milder, and less emotional term for a condition of angry discontent and protest verging on revolt. Protest and demonstration refer to specific actions such as marches, sit-ins, rallies, or other actions meant to register dissent. They can be legal or illegal, organized or spontaneous, peaceful or violent, and involve any number of people. Revolt and uprising both suggest a broader political dimension or civil upheavals, a sustained period of protests or unrest against powerful groups or governing systems. Thank you, AP. Drop bloody dead. And my response when I put that out was that it would be terrible if the AP central offices went up in flames as a result of unrest.
The war over words.
It's very important. It's, taking control of the narrative is what this is called. And it's very, very important because the words determine how we think of something. And you'll often find that as the commonality of language decays, people do have fewer and fewer things that they can say to each other. So my shop is burned down in a riot. I'm ready to shoot whoever did it. But no, I mustn't be upset because that unrest only occurred because of underlying grievances.
That's breathtaking.
Yep, it sure am. And I can add that to my woke list for Crisis Magazine. This is yet another institution that obviously has gone down the rabbit hole. So don't use no AP style books, ladies and gentlemen.
We need a functioning list of vendors to support who are at least silent, who are, or at least haven't put themselves out there as crazy.
Yeah.
I saw something on Twitter. I saw something on Twitter or YouTube where it's talking about influencers.
I hate that phrase.
I hate it too.
I know what they mean.
But it's a marketing thing where it's not okay to be silent on politics anymore. And I thought,
no, they're right. It's better to open fire with a Tommy gun. Then we won't be silent anymore. How about that?
To me, that's like communist revolution stuff. That's like you have to give credence, otherwise we're going to cancel you.
We're going to cancel you. See,
that's coercive.
You notice also what happens. Traditionally, there was a big swatch of life in this country of ours that was not political. I mean, 2 words: civic improvement, meaning the improvement of your city, making it a better place to live in, because there was the idea that there was a certain commonality between people of all views. They don't want their children ignorant. They all want to eat decently. They all want decent jobs. They all want nice places to live. These were seen as basic commonalities that people had in common with each other, and that there were areas outside of politics wherein people could cooperate. And these were things, and I always beat the drum on this stuff, but still, they were like historic preservation, conservation of nature, and preservation of parks, museums, libraries, schools, churches, theater and the opera, culture, in other words. These things were seen as being, in a sense, beyond politics, appealing to what was best in all of us, what was common to all of us. As the years have gone by, they became more and more politicized. Now, beyond merely being politicized at the edges, you're not to have a right to participate in them unless you make them political. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, politics, as I've said before, is the real opiate of the masses. This is what's being used to drug us into slumber. And it makes us forget everything. It makes us forget God. It makes us forget our common humanity. It makes us demonize everyone who isn't a member of our particular political tribe. We have to try to resist it, even when the other side are horrible and obnoxious. We have to remember that they are human beings.
This reminds me a movie I was thinking of a lot. One of my favorite movies. I said before, cinema knows how to portray evil in such new, intricate ways because, we're there. But we don't know how to portray good. And I just wanted to talk about one of my all-time favorite heroes in cinema, which is Rocky. It's not because he's a boxing guy. See,
it's not because he's Italian.
It's deeper. He is an important hero to mark down because he's living in Philadelphia, right? And everybody's rough and nasty. And, they're contemptuous of the rich. But Rocky is a good-hearted person. He's a humble person. He doesn't let this nastiness corrupt him and make him a nasty person too. You see? He didn't understand the nastiness of some of these people. And I think that's such a good quality to remember in this time because you see this nastiness everywhere on Twitter, on politics, and it makes you want to be nasty. It makes you want to lash out. It makes you want to snipe. And, Rocky didn't do that. And I think that's such a rare and admirable quality to uphold. I aspire to be like that, and it's so hard. It's so hard.
Well, it's extremely hard. I mean, I would say that in that area, my great ideal is, believe it or not, Washington Irving, who was genial himself and tried to see what was genial around him, and looked to see what was pleasing and enjoyable and tried to share it with his readers.
Yeah.
Now, and another fellow like that, and of course you're going to giggle when I mention this guy, but because he was easy to parody because he was very funny. But I'm referring to the late lamented Yule Hauser.
I'm not familiar.
Really? You've never heard of Yule Hauser?
From what?
He did California's Gold. That's amazing.
Oh, I don't know his name. I know his personality and the show. Yule Hauser.
That's Yule Hauser.
Okay, yeah, I know you're a big fan of that show. Yeah.
Well, he died? It was kind of. He died. Yeah, he went to announcer heaven.
When did he die?
The beginning of 2013, I think.
Oh, okay. They must play reruns then.
Oh, endless, because he generated so much material.
Yeah.
And his shtick was he went all over California.
Yeah.
And another guy in the same racket earlier who was a bit more to my taste, because he's a little, as I say, easy to parody, was another late lamented Ralph Story. But both of these guys had the shtick of pointing out enjoyable, pleasant places in the Golden State. And it was funny. Hauser, I remember an interview with him. He said, yeah, I know there are rapes and murders and all that sort of thing. We all know that those things are around, but that's not what people want to spend their time meditating on. They don't want to have their whole lives consumed with what's terrible, because there's an awful lot of good out there to see.
There's a certain clash within you, Charles, because with all your heart, you want to promote people to be like Hauser in terms of, promoting these cultural aspects of our society. But at the same time, you can't stand the personalities of these people, I feel.
What do you mean? Well, I mean, they're funny. I can't say I couldn't stand Hauser. I mean, he was funny.
But you've made fun of similar people. I mean, not perhaps not Hauser, but...
Oh, no, I'll admit it. They're fun to make fun of. And they're easy to make fun of. But I don't, honestly, I think it's an affectionate fun making.
Okay.
I mean, I often poke fun at people, places, and things I'm actually very fond of.
Yeah.
The LA of the 60s, the Hollywood of the 60s that I grew up in was ridiculous and insane, but it was also kind of fun in its way. And it sure was a lot better than the hellhole Hollywood became in the 70s and 80s. You're right. I mean, there is a certain double edge there.
Because they're simple people too. They don't have that same level of intellect, perhaps,
Yeah.
So it's kind of
and yet at the same time, they're doing things that are kind of neat. Well, I mean, like when a perfect example, and I've often made fun of this sort of person, and yet I love them, is like the docents at some of these obscure historic house museums around the country. And I've been to a lot of them. And, they're all the same sort of thing. The house is some local notable who nobody outside Farquhar County ever heard of. But he was a state senator from Farquhar County from 1890 to 1917. And nobody's ever heard of this guy, but he's a big deal there. And you'll go to the house, and I know I've done this before. I've made fun of them, but you go to that sort of a place, and the docents are really into it, and they will tell you all sorts of details that you'll never remember, and point out all sorts of things that you can't possibly keep straight in your head. But there's something wonderful about that too. It's funny, but it's also wonderful.
To me, it hurts me because I've gone to all these sorts of places, and I feel horrible because I'm a passerby. I'm going through and I'm out. I can't match them on their appreciation, and I feel terrible about myself that it's like, for me, it's like my reaction is, oh, isn't that neat? But for them, it's so much more. And I just feel, I feel sad that I can't meet them on their level of enthusiasm,
Oh, not me. You see, I enjoy them.
Okay.
And I enjoy the passion they bring to it.
Okay.
I mean, it really, let's put it this way, having a deep love of certain places. I admire those who have a love of their place. I think I mentioned this before, but there was a recent spat of articles in England about the somewheres versus the anywheres. Have I said this before on the show?
No.
Well, all right. I may have said it on other shows, but basically, there's the idea that you could divide people into two groups: somewheres and anywheres. The somewheres are people who are deeply rooted in a particular place. I mean, the docents are the obvious extreme example, but people who are very much into wherever they're from. I don't know, cheer the local football team every Friday night. Always at the diner. They go to the Elks Club for the monthly dance. Whatever, I don't know. But the point is, They're very much rooted in wherever it is they are. And then there are the anywheres, who you could pick them up and drop them any place on the globe, and they'd be going after their Starbucks, and they'd be online. They'd just be, it wouldn't matter where you put them. They're totally uprooted. They have no roots where they are. So this was the dichotomy that was proposed. So I read several articles along these lines, and I came up with two other additional possibilities.
Okay.
In addition to the somewheres and the anywheres. I would say that they're the everywheres. And these are people who are, how do I put it? They could be anywhere, but they understand that every place has its own identity, its own ethos. And to the degree that they're in any place, they try to participate for as long as they're there. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And they appreciate the uniqueness of every place, even though they'll never be entirely a part of it.
Okay.
They'd be everywhere instead of anywhere.
Well, that's clearly you, right?
I would, and a lot of other people, but yeah, I would say I would fit in there. Then there's the fourth kind, the elsewheres. You know, they're connected to lost Atlantis, to our space brothers beyond the stars, to lost civilizations, to alternate realities, parallel universes, other dimensions. They can be found in various fringe religions and alternative philosophies and all that kind of stuff. And they're and not just that. I mean, I would consider the whole circle around the late great Edward D. Wood Jr. as having been definitely elsewheres. Yes. And so while I admire and almost revere the somewheres, while I have a certain, I don't want to say contempt for the anywheres, although I do when they want to change anything. What I hate are anywheres coming in and saying, well, we're going to redo everything now. No. Then whap, whap, whap. Go get a latte and shut up. I can't very well dislike the everywheres because that would be self-hatred, which is unhealthy. But I have a certain sneaking sympathy with the elsewheres. Because, when you and I get all tied up in knots about stuff, you might say, well, I'm telling you that Trump is the man he's the man of the hour. He's the one we've got to vote for. To which I say, oh, God help me. No, I'm telling you it's Biden. What do you say? I say the Lord Maitreya is coming and will reconcile all. It's hard to argue with that.
Do you really know people like that?
I sure do.
I guess Hollywood in the 60s and 70s will do that.
Oh,
ample opportunity.
Yes, indeed. And the truth is that when I get my most frustrated with things in the real world, I look longingly at these outposts of other worlds.
Yeah. I do that sometimes. When I get down, I go to that New Age BS generator website.
Yes, that's wonderful. There's always consolation to be found there. But you've got to put your brain on ice. You bet.
Yeah. It makes me feel good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it does. It's such wonderful drivel. I mean, and I think this is part of the problem that a lot of people of our persuasion have these days, is that we don't accept and embrace the joy and amusement there can be in just blasting the synapses off into outer space.
This reminds me of Maz, right? I mean, it's similar. It's just letting go, just tuning out,
Middle-age withdrawal syndrome. The difference is it's not a permanent setup. With Moz, you just, it is similar. It is a form of escape. But, I always have to think of J.R.R. Tolkien in this area. Because he said, and I quote, "It's easy to debunk escapism. But notice the ones who generally do the debunking are the jailers." And when people tell you, you got to face things the way they are, I do. I face them the way they are. They're crap. They're horrible crap. They're worthless. Most people go to hell. Chances are you and I are among them. Okay? Is that all right? You got enough realism for you, pal? Oh, well, I don't know about hell. And oh, I see. So we're not really interested in looking reality in the face. Okay, I get it. Your escapism is politics or sports or whatever it is. I get it. And that's the thing. If you think about it, in a way, the current focus on politics is a bizarre kind of escapism as well from the realities. Death, judgment, heaven, and hell.
Yeah. All right. Let us move on. We have so many questions. And before we even get to the questions, we have the memes. It's time for the memes.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. All right. Just one meme today is from Todd Bird in comments for our video. Now, this is relating to last week's episode where we're talking about your mom's mystery dish, right?
Yeah.
And so he says, Vincent's admiration for Charles's mother coming not from her elegance, loving kindness, or steadfastness in faith, but rather her ability to manipulate those beneath her in unique and effective ways is very on brand for Tumbler House. Not to mention her great new idea for food in the cafeteria.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. What happens to the mackerel on Saturday? It reappears as mystery dish.
Well, all the leftovers, right? Where it's sort of,
It's not just the mackerel.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. I mean, there are nutrients in these foods that are
Yes,
important.
there are.
Right?
Nothing goes to waste at the Tumbler House commissary.
No, we're environmentally responsible.
I'll say low carbon imprint. What exactly is in that pot? What they said, they're stirring this green goo, and I don't mean green as in muddy green. I mean fluorescent.
Well, that's fun, right?
Green.
It's like that kind of. Wait, is that green?
Well,
that looks like sort of turquoise.
It does. Yeah, it does. This is a good example. It doesn't come across well, but in real life, this thing is really green, like St. Patrick's Day green, and that kind of shimmering iridescent green, and they're lumping big ladlefuls onto your plate or your bowl, splat.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Eat up.
Well, it's unique. I'll tell you, Saturday trips to Tumbler House Tower are always. I remember the first time I came in on a Saturday, and I thought, well, maybe today of all days I'd be able to go up to the executive dining room. No, they gave me a voucher for the commissary because apparently on weekends you have to have vouchers. So I handed in my voucher, and I got a plate full of mystery dish. And I'd been there before. I knew what this stuff was. It was everything that had been rejected during the course of the week. And I asked,
rejected. I mean, just leftovers, right? I mean, just because you have leftovers doesn't mean it's rejected.
Well, let's just say it was leftover. And I asked Sarah, the lady that cleans things up in the commissary. I asked her, I said, Sarah, tell me the truth. Is this just leftovers? Is it stuff that didn't get used? Or is it stuff that you've actually picked up off the plates that have been left behind? And she gave me a big grin and said, you don't ask me no questions. I won't tell you no lies.
I don't know why you always have to be prying.
It's just a question.
What are you, some investigative journalist?
Well, I am curious about what goes into my gut,
How come you weren't curious with your mom's dish, but now suddenly you've developed all these scruples for what you eat?
For one thing, I don't know how to break the news, but the commissary cook staff, I can't very well call them the chefs, they're not my mom. I had a basic, innate, possibly misplaced trust in my mother. I just can't summon up the same thing. When I see the same weirdly iridescent hues being served on a plate, I have my suspicions.
Well, yeah, just we try to make it how your mom made it, right? Is that what people say? Oh, just like how my mom made it.
Just like mom made, yeah. Well, that I can't argue with that. I really can't. And of course, it's also true that the stuff that we left on our plates went into it. So, in that sense, it just strikes me as a little weird, though, especially in the the spirit of coronavirus, that anything left on anybody's plate would go back into the mystery dish vat.
That does sound dangerous. I'll have top men looking into that.
Oh, I'm sure. There'll be a committee formed.
That's right.
Blue ribbon panel.
All right, questions.
All right.
First question is from Anne.
Anne.
Greetings, Charles and Vincent. Being as Charles is so good at reminding the audience of his favorite upcoming feast days and holidays, I was wondering if he has a favorite calendar. Would there be any in particular that he recommends?
Well, there are two ways you can look at that. There's the wall calendars versus other calendars. In terms of wall calendars, both the FSSP and the SSPX put out really good calendars. There are a couple of others. There's not the Liturgical Press, but there's a third one I've seen that I really like, and I can't think of who it comes from. And I feel bad about that, but I can't. And then I also, because I'm very fond of calendar lore and all that, I got to tell you the truth. I love Dom Guéranger, who is not dealing with the 1962 calendar or the 1960 calendar, or even the 1912 calendar. Dom Guéranger goes back into the 19th century, but I really love his arrangement of the calendar, and I consult it every day. I'll also bring up something that will make you giggle uncontrollably, ladies and gentlemen, or not. The Old Farmer's Almanac. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's the Old Farmer's Almanac? Well, it's a thing called the Old Farmer's Almanac, which about this time of year, starting in September and going as late as November, you'll see for sale in most quality stores and wherever fine whatnots are featured, or however they used to say it, I forget. Available in fine stores everywhere. And it is an almanac. It's got the days of it's got a calendar that has the various saints' days in a very archaic arrangement, pre-60, about Dom Guéranger era. Plus things that have happened on every day, plus little bits of folk wisdom and that sort of thing. It's been going since the 1790s. And it's got weather predictions. It's a wonderful thing. I love the Old Farmer's Almanac, and I always get it every year, and I read it cover to cover, and I really enjoy the Old Farmer's Almanac.
Okay. We have a ton of questions from Yusef. It looks like he sent in 11 questions, or we're going to ask 11 questions from him or so.
Really?
No, I think I split it. I split it between the pre-show and here, so it's probably more like 7. Yeah.
Yusef, I do my best, but you're gonna wear me out. All right, fine. What do we got from Yusef?
All right. By the way, all these questions, he's a $5 patron, and he
5 big ones, Yusef. Scratch what I said. We love you. Anything you want to hear, anytime, any day. $5 wins our loyalty. Let that be a lesson to all of you out there. 5 big ones.
All right. All right. So yeah. Let's see. First question. Why was early Islam characterized by such intellectualism and inventiveness, but modern Islamic cultures seem so backwards in their approach to intellectualism and rights of women?
Well, I'll tell you, and what I'm going to say is not going to sound like fun, but I don't care. In its first few centuries, you've got to remember that Islam very rapidly conquered what had been one of the major centers of civilization, i.e., the Near East. Syria, Mesopotamia, the Holy Land, eventually Asia Minor, a lot of Asia Minor, Persia. These were areas that supported brilliant civilizations and high levels of culture, and they were very rapidly Islamized. Well, in the first few centuries, a lot of what remained of the learning and sophistication of their previous civilizations carried over. But at base, Islam is actually a kind of anti-intellectual religion. And over time, the overlay of Islam became more and more authentic, as you might say. And that tremendous intellectualism that they inherited dissolved as the implicits in Islam over time came more and more to the front. And that's why, in my humble opinion.
Right. I know it isn't anywhere close to Christmas, but I have to ask, how do you think A Christmas Carol would be different if it was written by a Calvinist?
Tiny Tim would die, and he would deserve it.
I guess that's true, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Cratchits deserved what they got because they weren't among the elect. That's why they were poor.
Sad.
It's not a story I'd want to read. I could imagine maybe Scrooge would start out as a philanthropist, and the three spirits would show him the error of his ways and of celebrating Christmas at all.
Yeah, that's true.
Papish holiday.
Please tell us about the legend of Pope Joan, the first female pope. Do you think she existed? If not, why was the legend created?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think that she never existed because I forget which popes they were, but the two popes in between which her reign is supposed to have been actually were an interesting pair because the one pope died, and the day he died, the cardinals assembled around the deathbed and elected his successor. There was no interregnum. There was no sede vacante at all. It was, so I suspect that it was put in there, frankly, as a joke. In other words, it's kind of like if you write an account of something.
I'm sorry. It was put in where and by who?
It was put in a particular chronicle by an anonymous writer as a bit of a joke, and it was done in such a way that it would have been obvious to anybody who knew the thing that it was not true. It's sort of like when you'll occasionally see humorous accounts of one thing or another, and then they'll say, and it took place on November 31st. Well, of course, there is no November 31st. So if you've got half a brain, you know it's a gag.
What century did this happen?
Gosh, I don't even remember. And I've written a book on it.
Right. I remember it's in Vicars of Christ that you even put this in.
The whole thing's in Vicars of Christ. And I go into some detail about it. And I point out that in Chesterton, one of Chesterton's Father Brown stories, Father Brown solves the mystery through seeing a photograph of a library, and it revolves around how he would get into a secret passage. So he sees the picture, and he goes to the actual library. He puts his hands on one section of the books. He pulls them back, and the door opens, the wall opens, and they go in the secret passage. So it was asked, well, how did you know where the lever was and which books to pull? He says, well, because I saw the titles in the photograph. And they were The Religion of Frederick the Great. He had none. The Snakes of Iceland. There aren't any. And A True History of Pope Joan, who never existed. So that's how he knew. And then I point out that it's a particularly Catholic insult to claim that any cardinal one happens to dislike, say Cardinal McCarrick, has vowed, if elected, to take the name Joan II.
I thought you said that about a different cardinal. I thought a different cardinal said that.
No, it doesn't matter. I'm using what popped into my head. Don't worry about it.
I see.
And this is what's called in the trade a continuity issue. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
Just move along. Willing suspension of disbelief. You know, it's like when you're looking at a TV show or a movie, and in one scene the guy's tie is red, and then you see him again and it's blue, and he couldn't have changed it.
Sounds like an Ed Wood movie or something.
Well, Ed Wood's films did definitely have certain continuity issues. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Right? Why are the other non-Western countries around the world so poor compared to Western nations? My parents are Haitian, and my grandmother was alive in Haiti when their currency was equal to that of the USA. A lot of my friends with immigrant parents can say the same. What happened?
Well, a number of things. Decolonization, for one thing. Now, Haiti is a very special case because, of course, Haiti was the first independent black republic. And its birth was, shall we say, traumatic. Very, very nasty slave uprising, which, however, oddly enough, was initially a royalist slave uprising. People don't realize that, but it was. It was very, very bitter, partly, of course, because the king had been murdered, or deposed, I guess, in 1792. So, Toussaint Louverture, who was the head of the first Haitian uprising, was both a very devout Catholic and a very staunch royalist, supporter of Louis XVI.
Where was the good abolishment of slavery? I thought you said, wasn't it one of the Caribbean states where they abolished slavery peacefully?
There were quite a few of them, but not Haiti.
Oh, okay.
And Haiti, in fact, they were all peaceful except for Haiti.
Oh, okay.
And that is one reason why Haiti, I think, is in such a bad position. They chased out all of the whites. There are very few who were allowed to remain and who still have descendants there. And they were allowed to remain because they performed jobs that were considered utterly essential for the good of the nation. About 5% were Creoles of color, and their descendants are still pretty dominant. And then 95% were black, and still are. And Haiti went through various uprisings during the course of the 19th century, but they were occupied by the United States alongside the Dominican Republic in the 19-teens and 20s, and got a lot of American aid. But then in the 50s, they were taken over by a very peculiar man, Papa Doc Duvalier, who was both a dentist and a voodoo practitioner.
Sounds like a character in a book.
Definitely. In fact, Haiti would be happier if he'd been a character in a book and not president for life. Haiti would have been a much happier country. Yeah, very, very sad. But for most of the third world countries, decolonization was the worst thing that ever happened to them.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I don't think we've talked about that on the show at all. So is decolonization by de facto bad? Is it just...
Well,
like, what does that mean? People are driven out of the country?
Well, it means several things. Firstly, and of course, this varies from country to country, but the basic pattern is that the colonials would settle an area. And mind you, a lot depended upon what was there before. So India, for instance, had a fairly high level of civilization, but it was, if you'll pardon my saying this, kind of stagnant. And it was very divided. I mean, even the concept of India is a British construct. They created India. Even Indian nationalism was based on British ideology, which is why the co-founders of the Congress Party, Annie Besant, was an Englishwoman. the concept of nationalism, as it became expressed in third world countries, was a Western ideology. So, because they had a very different way of looking at the world before the Westerners came. And in Africa, it was all the more so, because when the colonial powers divided Africa, they did so in most cases. There are very few that weren't like that: Rwanda, Burundi, Lesotho, Swaziland. But usually, they simply conquered different areas, created colonies with very little, and drew borders with very little reference to the ethnic groups, the tribes that were there. So at independence, each of these countries had several problems going for them. Number one, well, there's another thing, of course, is that the Western powers would create a westernized class of technocrats that would basically help them run the colony. But they were very often, on the one hand, cut off from their traditional values, but not really imbued with European values, and very often not Christianized very deeply. So in other words, you've got a group of people who are no longer what they were, but they're not really integrated into European society either. And so they became very individualistic, not to say kleptomaniac. And so in colony after colony after colony, when independence came, control was delivered into the hands of this class, who very often fell to fighting with each other, and as I say, running the country not for the common good, but for their own benefit. And added to this were innumerable ethnic struggles, as different tribes jockeyed for position. And in some places, like Uganda, like the Congo, and elsewhere, if you weren't a member of the dominant tribe, your life could become very unpleasant. And this was ignored entirely by the West, just as the million or so people who died during the partition of India was and has conveniently been forgotten by Westerners, because they were so excited with themselves for giving India independence, they didn't bother about the terrible results. And that's been the weird inverted guilt that the European powers have felt ever since. And they'll beat their breasts for colonization, but demonstrate no feeling of guilt at all for the horrors that resulted because of decolonization. And of course, decolonization basically made these things a lot cheaper for the European powers as well, because while they generally continued to do business and make money out of their former colonies, they were no longer responsible for governing or subsidizing them. So if you like, it was kind of colonialism on the cheap. And they could feel virtuous about it because they'd given them freedom, which in country after country meant freedom to oppress those who weren't part of the governing circles.
All this sounds so familiar.
Doesn't it just?
Time's a flat circle.
Yep. And the same thing appears again and again and again.
All right, next question. Can you please tell us about King James Jesse Strang, the Mormon king of Beaver Island off the northeast coast of Michigan, and his assassination?
Yeah, I sure can.
Okay, this is a poorly worded question, but I'm going to bail out Yusuf and say, please do so.
Oh, thank you. All right. You see, Yusuf, there's the trick. If you ask me if I can, I can. But will I? That's... well, Strang was basically, Strang was kind of the leader of a sect of Mormons. You see, the Mormon Church, although we know the major one, the major Latter-day Saint group in Salt Lake City, they have a number of smaller groups, and Strang was the leader of one of these, whom he led to this little island in Lake Michigan, is it? And he set up a kingdom with himself as king. And as, a great believer in polygamy, he had a lot of, shall we say, handmaids. And love was love. But eventually... What?
That's good. No, yeah, you're right. Love is love. All right.
Well,
Sorry.
are you against love? Oh, now you're coming out against love.
No, I'm embracing love.
Okay, so did King Strang.
Yeah.
And so the result was that eventually, and here I'm a little bit weird on the details. I don't really recall if he was overthrown by his own people or folks on the mainland invaded and put an end to his reign. But whichever it was, I think he came to a bad end. Nevertheless, there are still a few Strangites left who hold that he was the true king and prophet.
Did he have a successor?
I don't think so, but I wouldn't swear to it. If so, the more of those elsewheres we were talking about.
Okay. What is the Southern strategy? How did it reshape, if at all, the Republican Party in the United States?
Well, it reshaped it considerably. See, basically, after the Civil War, the Democratic Party had as its main center of focus northern urban Catholics and the Southerners. Now, this was kind of an uneasy mix because you had segregationists in the South, and you had in the North Catholic ethnics who didn't have a lot in common with the Southern folk. Not a lot that was obvious, shall we say. At that time, Protestants tended to be Republican, especially Episcopalians and Lutherans and people like that, and blacks tended to be Republican because it was the party of Lincoln. Well, along comes Franklin Roosevelt, and he puts together the New Deal coalition, which includes a lot of Catholic ethnics, not French Canadians in New England, but most of them. A lot of Catholic ethnics, the South, and blacks. Well, this was a very unsteady mixture, to say the least. So you had the big civil rights issues of the 60s. And shortly after that, the Democratic Party embraced abortion and so on. Well, these two things hit the South very badly because, on the one hand, a lot of the Southern whites were segregationists and didn't appreciate it. And a lot of them were also very convinced Christians and were against abortion. And then gay rights and everything else that came along with it. So the Republican Party reworked itself as the party of values, as it were. And in doing so, broke up what had been the solid South. So most Christian white Southerners joined the Republican Party. And so this, of course, culminated in 1968 when the South, a lot of the South went heavily for Richard Nixon. And it was solidified over the next few years. And time and time again in the 70s, you would hear, the first senator, the first governor, the first congressman from this or that southern state to be a Republican since Reconstruction. That was a constant refrain. So the South became pretty heavily Republican and has stayed that way ever since. Did that change the Republican Party? Oh, yeah, it sure did. Because it set up a tension between the so-called country club Republicans and the new right, the values Republicans, who are often Southern or Midwestern. The Republican Party had been very much the party of wealthy Northeasterners to a great degree, as well as Protestants elsewhere and outside the South. It started getting a lot more Catholics, and it started getting a lot of Southerners, and these two groups at least altered the rank and file of the Republican Party to a great degree. And then the nomination of Ronald Reagan was probably the epitome of that change. Bush Jr., or Bush Sr. rather, was seen as kind of somewhat of a recrudescence of the old Republican Party, the party of Rockefeller and people like that. But Bush Jr. had reinvented himself to be a Southerner.
It's true.
A bigger contrast in style between Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. you couldn't imagine. And since then, the Republicans have, traded on being good old boys and all that. And of course, you've had people like Ted Cruz and any number of Southerners in the Republican Party. Having Jeb Bush is another remade Bush. I mean,
what do you mean?
Well, I mean, he became a Southerner. He went to Florida.
Oh, he became Catholic too.
Yeah, I mean, he's the ultimate remade Bush, and his son, from New England WASP to Florida Latino in 3 generations. I mean, that is it. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm all for it. But I mean, it's just kind of funny when you think about it. The complete reinvention of a family.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And it only took 3 generations to completely transform them. So, and I wish them well. I've got nothing against them. But then I have nothing against anyone.
Good. All right, next question.
You just left that by Declaration of Universal Acceptance.
Yeah, it's a model for us all.
Thank you for that vote of affirmation. I appreciate it. It's very sincere. I like that.
All right. Are you?
No, I know it's great. I like a model for us all. Let's move on. That was great.
Thank you. Okay. I've heard that Nixon created the crack epidemic in Black American communities on purpose, and that the war on drugs is a badly veiled attempt at giving government free rein to abuse its people and other nations. Is continuing the war on drugs a good thing?
Well, the first part of it, I think you must have heard, Yusuf, from one of the elsewheres we were talking about earlier.
That or a pothead.
Man, I know yeah.
So you're in favor of war on drugs and all the law enforcement that we have to pay for to do some silly...
excuse me, haven't you heard they're defunding the police?
That's true.
The war on drugs is over in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis.
Wow. Well, that's good then, I guess, right?
Must be.
Right? I always thought Joel Osteen was just another televangelist, but a lot of Protestants seem to really hate him. Why is that?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know that much about him. I've never seen him in action. I've seen pictures. I know he's too tall, kind of gaunt looking. I suspect I have skimmed some evangelical texts on him. I think they say that he's got some sort of new agey deal going, prosperity gospel and all that kind of stuff, I think. But don't quote me, I'm not really sure.
All right. What is the history of televangelism?
Well, I mean, it goes back almost as far as the origin of the medium, especially in southern and midwestern states. When I was a kid, we had a lot of really cray-cray televangelists. My personal favorite was the Reverend Ernest Angley, God's Man of the Hour, coming to you from the Miracle Cathedral in Akron, Ohio. But they had a lot of them. Billy Graham, of course, was probably the best known. He didn't start out as a televangelist. He started out as an old-time revivalist. And his first famous revival was in Los Angeles in 1949. You got to remember, the LA of 1949 had a lot of people from the Midwest and the South living there. And they got very excited.
Pardon my ignorance, but what is a revival?
Well, basically, in evangelical Protestant belief, every now and then, the people will really get religion, you know. I mean, they're nominally religious, say, but the Spirit will come on fire. The Spirit be moving all over the land, you know, and people get into it. And they don't necessarily speak in tongues, but they get very excited and jump up and down and pledge their lives to the Lord and accept Jesus as their personal Savior, all that kind of stuff. And it gets really exciting. And basically, you'll have a revivalist get up and he'll call for the sinners to come to Jesus and give up the phrase "come to Jesus" meeting refers to a revival. To cast off their sins, come up to the altar and pledge themselves to their Lord and Savior. Very emotional, lots of hymn singing, lots of testifying. I was a drunk. I was down in the depths of despair. And then our Lord saved me. He pulled me out. That kind of thing. Personal testimony.
Got it.
And the people they'd have what was called an altar call. And people would come forward to testify their newfound faith and so on. And that it's been an intermittent phenomenon in American religious life, actually since colonial days and the First Great Awakening.
Why is it a specifically American thing?
Well, it's not specifically American but those people that have it overseas have generally taken it from us. I suspect it's because of the nature of American Protestantism as a whole. It's very emotional. Now, I'm not talking about things like the Episcopalians and so forth, but there's a certain kind of religiosity, a certain sort of people. Very, very emotional, very much based on feelings and on let's just say it's not really based too much on the intellect or on history, but on the feeling. I knew that Jesus was calling me. I love my Lord. I love him. I love him. His feelings. And there is in American culture a certain anti-intellectualism, which becomes all the more understandable when you look at how feeble our intellectuals are. I mean, it's one thing if you tend to be very emotionally driven. It's another if you're emotionally driven and the intellects you're looking at are pretty substandard.
So you're saying that Protestants in Europe are different?
Well, they are. Now, mind you, not entirely. Because you had movements like the Pietists in continental Europe and the Methodists in England that were very much along the same lines.
Okay, but those are the exceptions.
Yeah. Although they very often arose, as in England, as in northern Germany, as a response to the dryness and over-intellectualism of the state churches. You see, in Protestantism, what you very often got was a division, if you will, between theology and the life of the mind and the emotions and the so-called life of the spirit. And so whenever Protestantism got very dry and theoretical and scholastic on the one hand, or in the case of Europe, almost a department of state, then you would have this emotional response. And it would break out in hymn singing and rolling around and prayers and all sorts of fun stuff.
Okay. Is it true that in the Christian Hellenistic tradition, women are viewed as evil?
No.
Not even a little bit?
No. Hence the Blessed Virgin Mary.
So what's Hellenistic? That's just a period of Greece?
Yeah. And so basically what they're asking about, I guess, is the Byzantine, the Eastern fathers of the church. No, I mean, the fact is that after Our Lady gave birth to our Lord, for all of his followers who revere her, it's impossible to think of womanhood as evil.
It's a strange question.
I know, but it was asked.
All right, that is it for the questions from Youssef. But we have one special question, a rare question from a non-patron, because it's kind of an important question personally for this person. I'm going to keep it anonymous for this one. So he says, here's my situation. One of my roommates has his girlfriend living with him at our apartment. I'm thinking of reporting her to the apartment complex. Residents are not supposed to have guests for longer than 5 days. But I am not sure if I should because she has said she is a witch. Am I cooperating in evil by not reporting her? Should I report it and or confront them? I'm worried about turning my roommates against me and her possibly trying to curse me or us. I'm not afraid of being cursed as I have the sacraments, but my other roommates could be affected by it. Wow, modern problems, huh? Shacked up with a witch.
Yeah, that sounds like an Enquirer headline. Shacked up with a witch. Okay, well, there are a lot of things that would make a difference, like what is the nature of your relationship with these roommates? Is it casual, or have you known them for a long time? Is the shacky is he an old friend or just someone you met because of rooming together? So those are questions, because that determines how you might approach him. I'd get some St. Benedict medals, scatter them around the place. I would definitely think of moving out, frankly. I mean,
green scapular.
Yeah, green scapular is good as well. But I would definitely think about moving out. I mean, you might do what Trekkies do and move back into your mom's basement. But no, seriously, it just doesn't sound like a good situation for you to be in anyway. But if for whatever reason, if financial reasons, personal reasons, whatever, if you have to stay, then depending on the nature of your relationship with the guy, and or the other roommates, you might discuss it with them and explain that there's a problem with this. Ask how they would feel if you did something that they would object to. And I don't put it that way. Come up with a concrete example that you know they wouldn't like. You know, if you, I don't know, had Ilsa, the she-wolf of the SS, move in with you or something. I don't know. But that's a tough road to hoe, and you're right. It's a modern problem. I mean, golly, I'm sorry I can't be much more help, but there's so little I really know about the situation. But do see if you can get out of that place. It just doesn't seem like. See, if you do alert the management, the likelihood is you'll all be thrown out.
I might have asked this before on the show, but just speaking of witches and
warlocks,
I don't know. There's just so much of this crap everywhere now.
It's true.
One of the mystics said that there was so much witchcraft and demonic worship throughout the world. I mean, the whole Egyptian culture, if you look at it, really, I mean, what is that? I mean, that's
hey.
Back in the day, right? These.
Hey.
Sorry, but
now it's pure Islam.
All right, but one of the mystics said that the redemption of mankind just sort of knocked all of that to the ground. I mean, it just, it's like poof, and but it's slowly coming back, in after the redemption. Do you think that was true? That the redemption would have that sort of effect, like an explosion that just sort of annihilates all witchcraft across the earth?
A ton of it. Oh yeah. I mean, there's the famous story of the ship that was off Athens, or off Greece anyway, at the time when our Lord was crucified. Okay. And they heard a voice booming out, "Great Pan is dead."
What, their idol or something?
Yeah, the great god Pan, the goat foot god. Great Pan is dead. And the story goes that Saint Dionysius the Areopagite in Athens, whose feast day is coming up, said in response to the darkening of the sun and all that apparently was noticed in Athens, either the world is being unmade or an unknown god has died. And then, of course, St. Paul came along and explained to him what the story was. So, it certainly was, but it has come creeping back as faith has weakened. And now Satanism is very open about itself. And it's funny, there was this one chick in, I think, in Huffington Post, who proclaimed that the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg had made her a Satanist.
I saw you share that, and I read that entire article.
Yeah. And she said, now mind you, she doesn't believe she believes in Satan, but she does believe entirely in self.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. It's funny, these New Age Satanists or whatever, that distinction is so important when everything else is the same.
Yeah. I think it makes a difference. And she says, I realized I'd been a Satanist for a long time without knowing it. And I read that and I said, honey, you are a Satanist, all right. And you're right. You didn't recognize it. But the father of lies will gratefully accept any tribute and will respond in kind. There's the wonderful old story of the sorcerer's apprentice. I'm sure I've told it to you.
Tell us again.
Well, there was a sorcerer. And, one of the things about medieval magic was that basically it was based on the idea that you could either invoke angels, and that sort of trails off into prayer because you can't really make angels do anything. They'll help you or not, and you basically pray and that's it. Can't force them to do anything. But there was the idea that you could evoke demons and force them to do your bidding by basically shackling them with various magical formulae, generally based on the names of God. And that they would suffer all the more by virtue of you as a human being having shackled them. But this was dangerous. And if you didn't do things just right, the demon could slip its bonds and get you. And of course, once you were done with the demon, you had to send it back to hell. You didn't want the thing hanging around and lying in wait for you. So the story goes that the sorcerer had an apprentice. And one day the sorcerer had to go somewhere, was sick and stayed home, whatever the story was. I don't remember that part. But at any rate, the sorcerer was leaving. He was just closing up for the day and had the apprentice clean up. He said, now remember, don't read anything out of my books. Don't try any of my spells. You don't have the skill. I haven't taught you enough yet. And then he went off. Well, being stupid, the kid opened up one of the books, raised something up, couldn't control it, couldn't send it back, and the thing took him. And that was the end of the sorcerer's apprentice. So from that comes the phrase, never raise up what you can't put down. which is an old phrase in Europe, and it applies now to a lot of other things, not just demons. Basically meaning don't start something if you can't finish it. But the story of the Sorcerer's Apprentice was used in a cartoon.
I thought they made a movie with Nick Cage about it too. It could be wrong.
It's very possible, but they made a Disney cartoon.
Okay.
Using the Sorcerer's Apprentice as the jumping off point.
Oh, I see. I'm seeing it now. Okay, yeah.
Fantasia. And you know who was the Sorcerer's Apprentice?
Who?
Mickey Mouse.
Okay.
That's something, isn't it?
Yes.
Mickey Mouse is the Sorcerer's Apprentice?
That's interesting.
Well, the funny thing about it, and you wouldn't know this because you're very young and stuff, but when I was a kid and you would go to Disneyland, it's not like now where you pay one fee to get into the park. No. In those days, every ride had a different ticket.
That you paid for?
Well, you paid for a book of tickets in addition to your entry to the park. And when you ran out of tickets, you had to buy another book. The best rides, they were all lettered, and the best rides were the e-ticket rides. Those are things like Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion and all that. And if you're my age or older, the phrase, boy, this is a real e-ticket ride. If you've ever heard that, that's what that refers to. If you hear some oldsters saying that, now you know.
Okay.
But they had, I remember, this is going back now to the late 60s, early 70s. They had these particularly cheap, thick books of tickets. These were called Magipacks. And on them was a picture of Mickey Mouse as the Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia.
You know, I've seen that picture. He's wearing a
wizard's
blue
hat.
cap, yeah, and a red
and a robe.
Yeah,
covered with stars.
Yeah. I wonder why they don't show Fantasia anymore. That was quite a thing back in the day.
It's racist.
What?
It's racist.
Which part? There's like many different parts.
Well, it's the part with the demon and the that part's racist. We'll see, because now we don't call them demons; they're separated angels.
Is that original, or did you get that from somewhere?
I got it from somewhere, but it fits. It's as stupid as anything else we do today. Why is it everybody else gets to be a moron and I don't? Why do I have to make sense? Got you there, smart guy.
I don't know anymore.
All of these institutions, governmental, academic, social, spewing forth oceans of drivel. And they could just do it. They blah 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 blah. They could do all this, and I'm stuck having to make sense. Well, I don't think that's fair.
It's true. It's a world of difference.
Why can't I just excrete whatever nonsense twerks out of my head? Why can't I do that and get paid for it?
That's true. There is really no accountability for some of the things that we see, like that Judith Katz lady. Like, where's the cancel culture on that? Like,
none.
There's no limit to the amount of stupidity you can utter. Like the person on oh gosh, especially that I didn't know who this lady was who said who was talking bad about there shouldn't be a debate. Because debates are inherently, I don't know, racist.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, who's this? I can't believe how stupid this lady is. And you're like, oh, yeah, she's a member of parliament.
Yeah. See, I want in on that deal. I don't know how these people get to be able to do that, but I want to be able to say stupid stuff nonstop and be respected.
And AOC, I don't know how.
You know, I'm her love child. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming clean. I am the love child of AOC and Bill Clinton. Yep. What? Why not? Why can't I say that?
I don't know.
Well, We're not ending on a downer. I'm not going to let that happen.
Good.
No, not at all, especially because we have entered my favorite part of the year. And so, remember, as you said earlier, the important eternal stuff just keeps on going. It's not affected even by AOC, my mother. And so, as AOC's love child, which is actually what I'll be going out as on Halloween, what? Oh, now I can't go trick-or-treating as AOC's love child.
You can't go trick-or-treating, period.
Why? Because of my age?
No, because it's illegal. Well, not illegal, but frowned upon.
Oh,
you'll be a pariah.
Just because I'm the love child of an Hispanic congresswoman.
You know, I was doing a lot of shopping recently, and so the Halloween things are everywhere now, the Halloween displays, and I'm a little confused because everyone's selling all this candy, but then Halloween is, informally canceled. So I don't understand.
Well,
it doesn't make sense.
I'm gonna make a prediction here, and the prediction is that Halloween is going to be celebrated in LA County the way the 4th of July was.
While that's really fun, like, yay, it's actually a problem. It's actually, I feel, a bad omen.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because you have government officials that have absolutely no control on anything. And that's actually bad. While it's fun in this instance, it's actually really bad.
Well, they're losing control because they're exerting the wrong control. I mean, basically, if they outlawed bread, everyone would start eating bread despite them. And what does that mean? It means authority goes down the tubes.
Yeah, that's true.
If you give an unjust order, sooner or later you lose your authority. You may still have power, but power does not get willing obedience. You lose authority, then the limits of your power are the limits of your power. If you see what I'm saying. It means that if I can't put you in prison, if I can't get you, you'll do anything you want. Instead of respecting the law for its own sake. But let them reap the whirlwind. In the immediate, it is coming into October, the October country. And I'm thinking a lot in recent years, recent days, recent moments of my late friend, the great writer Ray Bradbury. And he called this time of year, which is ironic because, of course, in Los Angeles, October is very often quite hot. Not as bad as September, and there's nothing sadder than a hot Halloween, which we do get occasionally. But nevertheless, Ray came up with this wonderful saying that I'll tell you, I love it. The October country. That country where it is always turning late in the year. That country where the hills are fog and the rivers are mist. Where noons go quickly, dusks and twilights linger, and midnights stay. That country composed in the main of cellars, subcellars, coal bins, closets, attics, and pantries faced away from the sun. That country whose people are autumn people, thinking only autumn thoughts. Whose people, passing at night on the empty walks, sound like rain. Isn't that wonderful?
That's very beautiful.
Yeah, in kind of a weird, dark way. The Elsewheres will be very excited. But it is the very mystery of this time of year that I love, as well as the return of Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas and into Epiphany and Candlemas and Mardi Gras. Oh gosh, I love that whole cycle of celebration. And the way it brings together our pasts and our presents and our futures. We think during the holidays of all of our loved ones who are no longer with us. You know, our weird and strange friends, the elsewheres again, will say, "This is the time when the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest." You'll hear that repeated over and over. But November is the month of the Holy Souls, and it is a very magical and strange time of year. And so, to the best of your ability, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy it. Enjoy the nostalgia. Enjoy the memories and the hopes and the strangeness, the enchantedness, if you will. Because they can't take that away. Even if Halloween is banned, even if there's no turkey for Thanksgiving and no trees for Christmas, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because at the very least, you have all of these things past tucked up in your heads and the hope of something better to come in the future. Yeah?
Just the way you say that, it triggered a thought that we're trapped in a Dr. Seuss book now, where they're taking away the trees, they're taking away the turkeys, and where the Who's in Whoville or whatever,
yeah, well,
where you celebrate Christmas regardless of all the trappings, you know.
Yeah, that's very true. It is very, very true. And of course, again, you've got the hope that something better will come out of this sooner or later, and sooner or later it shall. I don't know when or how, but it will. And, you know, the other thing, too, during this wonderful period, a bit of a recommendation for you, ladies and gentlemen. Try to get in touch with people you've gotten out of touch with. Friends and relations you maybe haven't spoken to for years or decades. Cousins are a good example of this. You know, you haven't really talked to the twins since Uncle Edward died. That kind of thing. Give them a jingle. You know, I'm sure they'll be glad to hear from you, despite what happened at Thanksgiving in 1993. We've all gotten over it, and I'm sure they have too, so don't worry. Give them a call. Circle your mental wagons is what I'm saying. Use this time to the best of your ability to rest and relax and pull yourselves together. That's what we need to do. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, the jack-o'-lanterns and turkeys and trees that you carved and ate and trimmed in your childhoods, those are true. Those are real. The drivel that's going on now, it'll come, it'll go. So, be of good cheer. Our Lord has conquered death. We'll be celebrating his birth, and the real victory lies not in this world, but in heaven. The holidays of which I speak in this whole time are simply a foretaste of it. Nostalgia is really nothing but a longing for heaven.
Okay, and a reminder, patrons and non-patrons alike, send in Halloween questions. Non-patrons, this is your chance to get your question asked in the near future. Send in good Halloween questions so we can have a nice, fun Halloween episode with a lot of spooky questions.
A safe Halloween episode.
To send in the questions, go to Tumblr House website, the Contact Us page, at submission form, and it'll go right to me.
We might do an elongated Halloween show.
If we get enough questions.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll have to ask you to carve the jack-o'-lantern this year.
That's fine.
I'm not going to be able to get a pumpkin.
You get, what do those Irish do? Don't they do it on radishes?
Oh, turnip.
Turnips.
Turnips. Radishes. Oh, gee.
It's something. I knew it was something absurd. Like how could they even do that?
I don't know. You know, I've seen pictures of turnip jack-o'-lanterns on the computer. You know, on the internet. I don't know how they do those. I really don't. The pumpkin is perfect for it, but turnips and radishes. I mean, is that some Slovak deal?
Hey, watch your mouth.
What? I'm just asking. I don't know.
Some Slovak deal.
Well, ask your mom if they carved jack-o'-lanterns out of radishes when she was a girl. She'll probably look at you like you're nuts.
She would.
She'll say, "What are you talking about?"
All right.
And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that again, although we certainly express our own frustration, which I'm sure many of you feel, don't let that frustration dominate, because the truth of the matter is, God's in His heaven, and in a real sense, all's right with the world. Often doesn't look like that, but it is.
All right.
So, I got a question. Or do you have one?
No, what's your question?
It's about Monday.
What about Monday?
Well, if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
What other question?
Yeah.
Whose might the soul you save be?
It might be your own.
God bless, ladies and gentlemen. Take care.